In this tutorial, we will have a look at how to use AppInventor to make random choices that can be presented to the user. This could be the basis of some games, or as here, to emulate a six-sided die, often known as a dice. So we're going to get started, and the first thing that we have to do is to create a new project, which I'm going to call Dice. Onto this app, we're going to drag a list view component, which we're going to call list view faces, and we're going to give it the numbers that would appear on the dice as its options. Remember that one of the things that you should do when you have AppInventor is to always have the AI starter emulator loaded, unless you are in a Mac, in which case it will load automatically. Or if you are using an Android phone, then you will be downloading your packages to the phone directly using QR codes or the USB connection. So I have started AI Starter, and if I just check, that is working in the background, so that should launch my phone if I connect to the emulator. And so I will go to Start New Project, and I'm going to call this Simple Dice. Okay, so in my user interface, I'm going to use a list view. I'm going to drag that and drop it onto the screen. My list view is going to have the faces of a die. So in elements from string, I put each element with a comma. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's no spaces between these elements, otherwise it will cause problems. And the other thing I'd like to do is to be able to see each of those things. So I can see them, they're taking up a lot of the screen. So I'm going to adjust the height so that it shows maybe just a couple of rows. So I'm going to go to height and choose a number of pixels. My text size is 22. So I guess if I was to give it about 46, then that should be enough space, not quite. So let's go for maybe 64. So there's obviously a bit of padding around the font, still not enough. So I'll change that up to maybe 80. And we can see a couple of the values. There's obviously a scroll bar here that would let us have a look at the others as well. Okay, one of the things that I should always do when I bring a new component onto the screen is to give it a sensible name. So rather than list view 1, I'm going to rename that to list view faces. And if I then return to my instructions, I seem to have done everything here, given it the values, adjusted to 80 pixels, and I'm ready to move on. Okay, now we're going to show the actual dice face here, and you might suspect that an image would be the best way to do that if I'm going to use a JPEG for the faces of the dice. But a button might be a more versatile way of doing things. The button and the image can both accept clicks, but an image can only have a picture in it, whereas a button can have a picture background and also text on top. So I'm going to take a button, call it button result, and I'm going to make it quite big here and put an X in just so we can see what size of font it's going to be. So back to AppInventor. I'm coming to button and dragging that on there. I'm changing the text to a capital X, and I want it to stretch and fill the rest of the screen. So height is going to be fill parent and width is going to be fill parent. So that's nice and big, taking up the rest of the screen. The actual font itself is tiny, 14 point, so 256 is a nice computer science number, 1 byte or 2 to the power 8. and that's a nice size for a 320 widescreen. Again, I should always remember to rename is the first thing that I do. So I'm going to put it on, and button result lets me refer to it later on in the code quite easily. And that is my user interface ready to go. So moving on, I'm going to add an image click handler, and so I need to upload a picture. Now these pictures have been made available to you from the Google Classroom or from the school network, and they're in a folder called Dice Images. So coming back here, I'm going to click on the button. I'm going to go to image, which at the moment says none, and I'm going to choose to upload a file. When I choose file, I would have to browse to where I had stored my pictures. And for me, I can use the student drive and computing, S3, AppInventor, and we're in something called week 5 random app assessment. And I've got dice images. So you can see I've got the individual 6 faces of a dice. I've got a 3-dimensional kind of tumbling dice here. So I'm going to choose that tumbling dice, click on open, click OK, and it will then upload and use that as the image for my button. Okay, so having done that, I now want to give some code for when that button is clicked. So a .click handler is button result.click in the gold. And what do I want to do? Well, I want to set the text on that button to a random item chosen from the list of faces. Each individual part of the faces is called an element. So list view faces.elements is all of the individual numbers. I'm picking a random item from that list and I'm putting it onto the button. So back at AppInventor, I need to click on blocks. I need to choose my button result. Here's my click handler. And I want to change button result, so it's a button that changes itself. I'm just going to take any of the elements here, button result, but it's not the background color I want to change, it is the image. No, it's not, it's the text that I want to change. So I'm going to set the button result text to some part of list view faces. So I'm going to take anything off here. And list view faces, what I want to look at is the elements, the things that are part of that list. And then if I go to lists, I can choose pick a random item. Putting all those bits together, I now have my code. And if I connect to the emulator, and I'll just pause this while we wait for that to appear. So now my phone emulator has loaded up. I have a dice with an X on it, which actually is a button. If I click the button, then I've got the number 1. If I click it again, I've got the number 5, number 3, and so on. So it seems to be generating a random number. A few clicks should convince us that it's between 1 and 6. And that seems to be absolutely fine. Always a good idea to test your code on the phone. Notice here that there's a little bit of a clue here. This pick a random item was in a blue, so you look for it in the built-in functions in pale blue there. Okay, now as things stand, the user interface is giving us some random numbers, but it doesn't look particularly impressive. So there's a few things that we're going to try. We don't need to see the list of possible options for a dice, so we're going to hide list view faces by unticking visible. We're going to change the height and width of the button to 320 by 320 to nicely fill out as a square. And we're going to change the font size to be, instead of an X, we're going to tell the user what to do. So back to design view. I'm going to click on list view faces and I'll make it invisible by unticking here. And I can still use the values even though it's hidden behind the scenes. That's a very good technique to have when you're working with AppInventor. You can sometimes hide things away that you will use off screen. I'm going to choose button result, and instead of filling width and height now, which is stretching my dice, I'm going to change it to have 320 pixels wide and 320 pixels tall. Why am I going for 320 by 320? Because that's the size of my phone. 320 wide and then square for the graphic. My X, I'm going to change to click or shake. Now, more on shake later. To roll the dice. And if I try that, it's clearly a jumble of letters because of a huge font that I'm using here. So if I take it down to something more sensible like 36, and possibly change the text color to stand out a bit more. Okay, so I've tidied up my user interface. That should go through to the phone directly, so that looks a little bit better. I don't have this strange number 1 appearing, and it's telling me what to do. And when I do it, I get a very small number now appearing over my dice. Okay, so I'm going to pause this tutorial here, and in the next one we'll have a look at how we would use uploaded images.